No?
She's been
Did
bad.
you do something wrong?
The
Yeah.
right person may come.
That goes there with a friend.
Oh, the love in the room, Frankie. You can just feel the love, can't you? You can feel the
A
love.
whole lot of friends back here doing the Lord.
Why don't you go sit by her, Chris? Don't make her sit by herself. All right, everybody. We're going to get started, and Ted is going to open us up with prayer.
Okay. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. We'd like to meet freely, no one's bothering us while we meet here. People don't enjoy that privilege. Ask you to be with people that's less fortunate, people, some refugees, people like that. Ask you to be with your people, and I hope we can have more influence in the world than we do now. Help your people be together and spreading the gospel. Ask you to be with people that's not feeling well, people that's confined to places, people that be with people that don't know you. Help us to help them. Help us teach them in the right manner. Help us do what we can to help others, look for opportunities to serve others. Help us tonight as we learn something from your word. Forgive us of our sins and be with us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Ted. Good to see everybody here this evening, this warm evening. Glad you chose to come and hang out with your brothers and sisters. Tonight, we're going to talk about a topic that is I guess you could call it a hot button topic in our country. Something that we all deal with in one way or another. We're going to talk about addiction. Now, addiction is running rampant through our country. There's the opioid crisis and the heroin crisis and all this stuff. It's nothing new, is it? I mean, alcohol was before that and other drugs. It's been a problem for all the way back to Noah. I mean, it's always been a problem for people. And what we're going to talk about, we're going to look at it biblically, we're going to look at it scientifically, but we're not looking at it as, a lot of times when people talk about addiction, they make addicts look like horrible monsters. They make them look like these trashy, useless people. And the fact is, they're not any different than we are. They're just people that are lost, they're just people that have went a different path. And a lot of us, I would dare say, almost all of us, have been affected by addiction one way or another, either personally in being an addict or having an issue with drugs or alcohol, or having somebody in our family or in our life that had it. And it can really destroy families, and it's really messing with our society in a very big way. And what we're really going to talk about is having hope and empowerment, to give hope to the people that have addictions and to the people that are trying to help deal with them, and empower them to be able to change the situation, to be able to help the situation. The first thing we're going to look at is the definition of addiction. The definition of addiction, it says the repeated involvement with a substance or activity despite the substantial harm it now causes, because that environment was and may continue to be pleasurable or valuable. Now that's a really long definition. But there's four major points to that definition. The first one is addiction includes substances and activities. And substance is anything that's mind altering. It can be something as small as caffeine or nicotine, something that subtle, or it can be all the way up to crack and heroin and everything in between. Anything, even the sleeping pills some people take at night because they can't get to sleep. It's activities. Activities can be gambling, can be shoplifting, can be compulsive lying, it can be pornography. And it also goes to behaviors. You can be addicted to a behavior. Believe me. And when I'm telling you this stuff, I'm not telling you this stuff because I read it from a book. Yes, I got this information from a book and from a talk that I watched. But I've lived it. I spent over 15 years. I don't like the word alcoholic. I was a flaming drunk and a pothead for over 15 years. I did it all the time. I worked at a place I certainly worked at a place so I could smoke pot all day while I worked. When I played softball, I took beer in the outfield with me. Might be out there for a while, didn't run out. So when I tell you this stuff, I'm not telling you because I read it in a book. I learned it. My wife was 24 years was an addict. And we have grown through all this stuff together and dealt with a lot of this stuff and helped other people get through it. So I'm not just, this is stuff that I've learned and stuff that I've seen. The second part of addiction is it leads to substantial harm. Addiction always leads to self-destruction. The key to addiction is something that you're doing, really in simple terms, an addiction is just a bad habit gone crazy. It's a bad habit that just becomes self-destructive. And don't think for a second that addiction isn't probably the most selfish thing that people can do. It is totally selfish. Because all you're thinking about is whatever it is, that activity, that substance, whatever it is, you're just worried about getting to the next one, getting to the next time you get to do it. It's a very sad way to live. It's not really living at all, it's actually just existing. The third part is addiction is repeated involvement despite the substantial harm. Here's the crazy part of addiction. You know it's destroying your life, you know it's destroying you, but yet you continue to do the stupid thing. You can see your life falling apart, you can see your relationships falling apart, your kids, your job, your health, and you still keep doing it. And the fourth thing, addiction continues because it is or was pleasurable and valuable. Now, addiction starts off fun, especially with substances. Oh man, the first time you do a drug, the first time you get drunk or something, it's an amazing feeling. But it doesn't stay that way. It soon becomes a master and you become the slave, and it's a horrible master. It destroys every part of you in every way. So it's either pleasurable or it's valuable to you. When you talk about value, it has a purpose. Even though addiction can become self-destructive, it can be destroying you, it still has a purpose. For a lot of people, it's a coping mechanism. People don't know how to cope a lot of times, end up being addicts. It's a way to hide. It's a way to numb yourself from things. And there's two main trains of thought when it comes to addiction. One is that it's genetic. That I was born with a beer gene and I had absolutely no choice in the situation. It was passed on from my father, and that's why I drank. And if I wasn't in a church building with a bunch of Christians, there's a word I would use right here, because it's bull. It's just not true. It's just not. There's nothing that actually backs that up. And biblically, it's not backed up at all. And we're going to look at that. The second one is that it's a learned behavior, or something that you experimented and found, something you were in a bad situation and you were led to it, or you tried it yourself and did it. That's the nature-nurture thing. One is genetic, the other one is something you've learned. And they tell you when you go into therapy, they start asking about your family, the first thing they ask you is if your parents drank or were alcoholics. And the fact that my dad was an alcoholic, they told me there was an 80% higher chance I was going to be one. But that's not because it's genetic. It's because it's what I learned. It's the coping skill I learned from my dad. My dad had a really solid philosophy, very consistent. If you had a victory in your life, you drank a beer. If something bad happened, you drank a beer. If it was Tuesday, you drank a beer. If you were awake, you drank a beer. If you were breathing, you drank a beer. And because I watched that as a coping skill, when I hit a point in my life where it got bad, that's what I started doing. And it wasn't wonderful, I'm here to tell you. I lost everything over it. House, home, job, family, kids, I lost everything. Because of my own addiction. Let's look at Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5. And we're going to start at verse 19. We're going to look at verse 19 and 21. And here Paul is talking about the acts of our sinful nature. Or acts of our selfish nature. And we already talked about the fact that addiction is just pure selfishness. You're just thinking about yourself. You're not worried about anything but that next thing. They say that the most dangerous, horrible thing in the world is a woman scorned. The person that said that apparently was never around an addict who was looking for a fix and couldn't find one. Because that's a person you don't want to be around. It is a bad situation. Galatians 5, verse 19 says, the acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. So two things we get on this right off the bat. Paul is talking about our sinful nature, which is really just our nature without God. If we don't put God in the program, we're doing it for ourselves. It becomes basically our selfish nature or our addictive nature, whatever you want to call it. He also says that the people who live this way will not inherit the kingdom of God, which tells us two things. The beginning and the end of these things are sins. All these things we're talking about here are sins. Let's look at them real quick. Now, all of these things are either an addiction or the result of an addiction. Things that are caused by being an addict or being addicted to something. And when we talk about addiction, there are so many addictions out there today. It's insane. I mean, everything is an addiction. Yes, drugs are an addiction. Yes, activities are. Now cell phones are an addiction. Video games are an addiction. And you know, it's true, they are. When they can get to the point where they're still, I know people who just sit at home all day and play video games. They don't have a life. They don't have any connection to humanity. It's just, except for the people they talk to in their little headset thing. And we're going to talk about that before this is over. Sexual immorality. Where do we get out of that? We get sex addiction. We get pornography. We get lots of things like that. Impurity and debauchery. There is a lot of moral impurity in addiction. I'm here to tell you, people that are getting drunk, people that are getting high, people that are doing crazy things, end up doing crazy things with people they shouldn't be doing the crazy things with. Lots of immoral things happen. Lustful pleasure, debaucheries is lustful pleasures. Very much goes right along with the moral impurities. Idolatry and witchcraft. Idolatry, can idolatry be an addiction?
Yeah.
Yeah, people worship all kinds of stuff, don't they? Money, power, prestige. Got to have more stuff. That's an addiction.
Worship themselves.
That's the next thing I was going to talk about, Ted. Look at athletes, especially in the NFL. It drives me nuts. I can barely watch football because these guys are so hooked on themselves. Terrell Owens, I love me some me. Oh, go get a life. Come on. I mean, these guys can't make a tackle without flexing or dancing or doing something like, dude, you're getting paid. You didn't do anything.
Paid to do.
Yeah, you're getting paid to do this. You're getting paid well to do this. Get over yourself. But that's an addiction. It drives them. It can destroy their lives. A lot of athletes that live like that have a very hard time when they get out of the football or out of the sport because they don't have that glory and that power anymore. They don't know how to get it. And they end up being depressed. They end up being alcoholics or drug addicts themselves because they just can't cope without that addiction. The problem with that kind of addiction is it's only going to last so long. You can only be a professional athlete for so long. It's going to stop at some point. Hatred. Boy, is there hatred in addiction, and it causes hatred. What about prejudice? People are completely prejudiced against skin color, against race. It's self-destructive. It's harmful, and they keep doing it. Isn't that a definition of addiction? Addiction is not always what we think it is. A lot of times we just think of addiction as people that are passed out on the floor somewhere. But addiction can be much more subtle than that. Satan's much craftier than we often believe. Discord, quarreling, domestic violence. Oh my gosh. Is domestic violence gone crazy in this country or what? Ask Ray Rice. Remember that football player got caught in the elevator whacking his girlfriend in the head? Didn't realize there was a camera? And nowadays, I think you should just assume there's a camera everywhere. It's probably much easier. Jealousy, resentment, fits of rage. Fits of rage aren't only a reaction that people have when they're addicts. And some drugs cause you to get pretty amped up and pretty crazy. Also, fits of rage can be a coping skill. It can be an addictive behavior because it helps you cope with things. Helps you. You can push people away with it. You can protect yourself with it. And it's deadly. Behaviors probably are one of the worst addictions you can have. And you get addicted to acting a certain way in a certain situation that's self-destructive, yet you do it anyway. Selfish ambition. That's what we're talking about, the athletes. Just worrying about themselves and nobody else. Look at me, look at me. It's an addiction. It's a dangerous thing. Dissensions, disagreements, factions, envy, drunkenness. That's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? Orgies. But the New Living Translation says wild parties. So addiction is, according to this, what? It's an act of the sinful nature. Addiction is just another sinful lifestyle. It's not some incredibly special thing. It's no different than any other sin. But it is different in the fact that it's very hard to deal with. All sin is hard to recover from. Doesn't matter who you are. So it's a sinful lifestyle, but what does that make it if it's a sin? A choice. God's not going to tell you, don't be a drunkard, don't be angry, don't do these things. You're not going to get to heaven if you act that way, and then go, but you can't stop yourself. It's not your fault. Doesn't make any sense, does it? But that's a lot of what people get taught right now. There are a lot of people teaching addicts and teaching people with behavior issues that it's not your fault. Nothing you can do about it. Let's just deal with the aftermath. Let's just deal with the circumstances the best we can. But you're an addict, you'll always be one. That's the end of it. I was told that. I was told that by a psychiatrist that when I acted out and pitched fits and threw stuff and acted like a weenie head, sorry about my language, it's not your fault. You just get people around you, just gonna have to learn to live with it. And that is the worst thing I was ever told in my life. The greatest moment in my life, and I think in Melanie's also, was when we were having therapy 7 years ago. We were sitting in therapy and we were talking about these very things. And the therapist told us both this. He told Melanie this. You can be cured of addiction. You can get past it. It's not, they tell you that you're stuck with this the rest of your life. You're going to have to go to meetings the rest of your life. You're going to have to be this person the rest of your life. And this therapist said it's not true. It's a choice. You can fix this stuff. You can deal with the issues and you can fix it. And I've never seen somebody have the most confused expression when we got out of that therapy. Melanie had one side, it's my choice, yes. And then the other side, she was terrified because, oh my gosh, it's under my control. I'm terrified now. I don't have any more excuses. There was an experiment done in the early 1900s where they took a rat, put it in a small cage, and had one bottle with water, one bottle with water that had heroin in it, or a drug water. And every time, the rats they put in there would go to the drug water, drink it, and OD and die. So this turned out to be the way we decided this is how addiction works. Once somebody starts it, that's the end of it, nothing we can do. It's just going to kill them eventually. And a psychiatrist, named Bruce Alexander, professor of psychology in Vancouver, in the 70s thought, this doesn't seem like the facts really add up well. This doesn't seem right. So he did an experiment called Rat Park. And what he did was he basically made Disneyland for rats. He made a big cage, and in that cage, he had other rats, female rats, food, things to do. Now the water was still there. The regular water and the drug water were still there. But you know what? In that cage and in that experiment, very few of the rats drank the drug water, and the ones that did, none of them ever became addicted, and none of them ever died. And the conclusion was from this that it's not so much about the drugs, it's about connection. It's about being connected. This rat was by itself, isolated in a cage. It really had nothing else to connect to but the drug water that gave it some kind of relief. The other rats had each other. They had a connection. They had relationships with the other. They had other positive things to do, which caused them to not need to use the drug water. There was another experiment that happened just about the same time. It's called the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War, 20% of the soldiers were addicted to heroin. 20%. And the government found this out. Research was done by a woman named Lee Robbins in 1974. And the government was a little bit freaked out by this. They're thinking, my gosh, we're going to bring back countless heroin addicts to our country. So they got a little scared. So what they did was they decided to follow them. It's kind of creepy, but they did it. They kept tabs on them to see what happened. And over a few years, they came up with a statistic that's startling. 95% of these addicts, when they got home, quit. Never used again. Didn't go to rehab, didn't go through a 12-step program, stopped. Why? Connection. They were in a place where they could die any second, disconnected from their families, their friends, and everything. The heroin was a way to cope. It was a way to escape. When they got back, they reconnected to their wives and their kids and their families. So maybe we shouldn't call addiction addiction. Maybe we should call it bonding. Because the truth is, that's really what addiction is bonding. Because as humans, we all have an innate desire to bond with each other, don't we? To gather together. People do, we do it as Christians. We go to church. Other people become members of the Eagles or the Elks, or they join a bike club, or they do different things so they can be connected. Because we all have a need to be loved. We all have a need to be accepted. We all have a need to be productive and feel like we matter and we belong. And if you don't find it, healthy people, stable people, healthy people will get that connection from each other, from other humans. But if you have a traumatic experience, if you're isolated some way, or if life has just beat you down to the point where you can't deal with it, you'll find a connection somewhere. You'll find something that will help you ease the pain. It will give you a sense of relief. And that's where addiction comes in. People don't know how to cope. They don't understand what's going on. They can't handle it. The core part of addiction is about not being able to bear being present in your own life. I can't handle being me. I can't deal with looking in the mirror. Now, we may not have all experienced this personally, but I bet we've all had family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, somebody that's dealing with this. And the fact is, the connection is just a much better way of doing it. And a lot of what we do seems kind of backwards when you think about it. What do we do with addicts and people? We punish them. We make them feel bad about themselves. We give them criminal records. We make it almost impossible for them to reconnect. And I'll give you an example of how you can change your life, but your past still hangs behind you. Melanie has to go to pain management for her back to get pain pills. When she originally went, she was honest and open about it and told them that she had a drug problem with pain pills and stuff in the past. But instead of being glad or positive about the fact she was sharing this, they told her she had to go to drug counseling. She's been clean for 7 years. But she had to go to drug counseling. And I'm going to tell you what, you were talking about an unhappy person. When she came back from the first time from that, the goofy stuff that woman was trying to tell her, she was teaching the drug counselor stuff. Because the drug counselor read it out of a book. And that's the problem a lot of times with these counselors. They have good intentions, but they're learning this stuff from a book. They're not experiencing it. And it's really hard to understand addiction without having gone through it. Because it's a special kind of hell. And I mean that in the place, not in the cuss word. It's a horrible place to be. And it's very hard for us to understand it. But by doing that and punishing them, we put up barriers that make it very hard for people to reconnect. I mean, they're treating Melanie like she's still an addict, and it's been 7 years. At what point am I not an addict anymore? At what point do I get to be who I've become rather than punished for who I was? And in 2000, on all those lines, in 2000, the country of Portugal, their population, 1% of them were heroin addicts. 1% of their entire population. Now, they were doing it the way we do it. Sending people to 12-step programs, now don't get me wrong, there's a place for all this stuff, and it does help. But they were doing it like we do. They were giving people criminal records. They were punishing people for being addicts and making them do degrading things. Which I'll tell you what, you make an addict do something, I'm going to tell you something, addicts feel bad enough about what they've done, especially the ones that are really trying. Now you got to remember something when we're talking about this. All addicts don't want to not be addicts anymore. Some addicts want to stay that way. I know it sounds crazy and ridiculous, but some people don't want to change that lifestyle. And some people start to, and trust me, it gets hard at some point where you have to decide whether you're going forward or you're running backwards where it's safe. Because backwards might not be good, but backwards is familiar. And it's something you understand. It's terrifying to go forward. And I promise you that the only way you can do that is with God's guidance and God's strength. Because I don't see any other way. Because addiction is a sin, and you can't beat sin without Jesus. It just doesn't work. So Portugal had a 1% of their population. They decided, you know what, we're doing it the way everybody else is. It's not working. Let's try something different. So what they did was, they quit making it illegal. They delegalized, or what is the word? Decriminalized, that's the word. I shouldn't have said Gary. This is Guernsey County. They de-illegalized it. They decriminalized all drugs from marijuana to crack. And they decided all this money they were using to fight crime and to punish criminals or punish addicts, they were going to use to help them reconnect. The purpose was they were trying to give addicts a purpose, trying to give them a reason to get out of bed in the morning, trying to help them reconnect to themselves and reconnect to society. So what they did was they used that money to create jobs, and they also used that money to give addicts microloans so they could start their own businesses. Yeah, think about that in this country. Yeah, I'm going to give an addict a bunch of money so he can go start his own business. Right. Because I'll be honest with you, we look at addicts in a very, very negative way. Now, don't get me wrong. They earned it. But at some point, you have to let a person become who they are now, not who they used to be. It's a very tricky thing. So in this job creation, say you're a mechanic, they would go to a garage that needed a mechanic, and they would talk to the owner and say, listen, if you'll hire this guy, we'll pay half of the wages for the first year. Now that made it very sensible for the garage owner, and it also gave the addict an opportunity. And you know what happened? In 2015, 15 years later, their injected drug use was down 50%. ODs were down. And suicides were down. HIV was down. All crime related to addiction was going down. And the real key is seeing how the country reacted to it, because they didn't want to go back to the old way that they were doing, because they were seeing positive results. It was going the right direction. The first rat was stuck in a cage. It was isolated. The other rats had other rats around them. The thing is, we live in a society that we have communication, we have technology connections. You can text somebody, you can face-place somebody, you can tweeter people and text people and call people and do face-to-face things. The problem is our society is getting further and further away from that connection. That's probably, in my opinion, why addiction is getting so much worse. You realize you don't have to leave your house to do anything? Our houses are getting bigger and bigger, and our connections to people is getting smaller and smaller. You can do everything. You can pay your bills from home. You can do college. You can do school. They'll bring your food to you. You can talk. You know, you can even do therapy over your cell phone now. You can get a therapist and sit and talk to them on your phone. How personal is that? There's no connection. There's no physical connection. I promise you, if you have a crisis in your life, your 200 Facebook friends aren't going to be the ones that show up to help you. Your million Twitter followers don't really care. It's going to be the people that you have a true, genuine, physical, face-to-face connection with. It's going to be there. You can't be connected over technology. I just don't think that works. It takes the personal part out of it. It takes the connection away. And connection is really what this is all about. It's really about people that don't know how to cope, people that don't know how to handle things, and we're taught all the wrong ways or figured out all the wrong ways. And many of them are looking for a way out. I know that Melanie has told me many times that she tried 1,000,000 times to quit. Now, she did it all the wrong way because she went to her addict friends and asked them not to give her drugs anymore. That doesn't really work. That just made them happy because they got to use hers. I mean, it just didn't work. She was trying, but she didn't go the right direction. I can tell you this, I spent many a night standing at the kitchen sink, dumping my beers into it, going, I'm not doing this ever again, until on the way home from work the next night. Because the problem is you don't have a purpose, you don't have a connection, there's just nothing there for you. You're isolated. If you're not isolated physically, it's very easy to isolate yourself emotionally. And with all this technology, that's kind of what we're doing to ourselves right now. We're purposely isolating ourselves with technology. And we're one of the most isolated, lonely cultures that's ever been, and the world's getting more and more that way every day. Life has become much more like that first cage than it is like Rat Park. And that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. Now, this isn't about just learning where addiction is. It's about hope. It's about empowering people. This is empowering the people to understand we have so much misinformation about addiction out there. It's insane. All the different ideas. It's genetic. There's nothing you can do about it. We talked about that. The fact that you're just going to have to deal with me. And it's a scary, scary thing to realize, my gosh, I did this to myself and I'm the only one who can undo it. It's an incredible trial to try to do, and very few people make it all the way back out. Because it's really hard to destroy your life for 15 or 20 years and then step in front of a mirror, compare yourself to Jesus and go, ugh. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Suddenly everything I knew to be right is all wrong. And I have to change because I want to do what God wants me to do. So now I have to do all this different stuff. And then you start doing it and you realize every time you fix one thing, you find 3 other ones. And it's a struggle. Melanie and I started this journey together 7 years ago. And I'm here to tell you, it's been wonderful at times, but it's been absolutely horrible at other ones. It'll do one or two things to you. Either you'll grow more than you've ever grown spiritually and emotionally, or it'll destroy you. And unfortunately, a lot of people it destroys. A lot of people they don't know how to lean on God, or they try to do it without God. I'm not here to bash AA or anything like that, but they say you have to have a higher power. But it doesn't have to be God. It can be anything. It's ridiculous. We were in a meeting once, and the guy said that a doorknob was his higher power. Really? Really? Apparently you're about as bright as the doorknob. I mean, come on. How can that be? That says a lot for you when a doorknob is your higher power. One guy said a donut was. I'm like, really? You're going to have a higher power that you can eat for breakfast? You're nuts. That doesn't even make logical sense. And it doesn't. A lot of the things they're teaching addicts and the ways they're trying to handle it just don't make any sense. And it doesn't work. It's not working. The one thing you hear from addicts a lot, and one of the hardest things to deal with, is excuses. When you're an addict, you have an excuse for everything, never your fault. Oh, it's the way I was raised, my childhood was horrible, oh, blah, blah, blah. Now that might be the reason you act the way you do and you feel the way you do, but there's no excuse. God doesn't accept excuses. And the one thing that a lot of addicts do is blame everybody. And that's one of the hardest things. First things you have to do when you're trying to clear this stuff is start making yourself accountable. Holding yourself accountable to God. That's why God is the only way this works. Because without God, who's going to hold you accountable? You? Well, you already tried that. Look where that got you. You have to quit making excuses. And when you're dealing with an addict, you can't let them make excuses. You're not helping them. You're not helping somebody with a behavior problem or addiction problem by giving in to them and enabling them. Just about every addict I've ever known has at least one massive enabler in their life. Somebody, no matter what they do, the addict's not wrong. It's somebody else's fault. It's not your fault. They bail them out of jail. They do everything for them. Give them money to go buy drugs. Some of them even go buy drugs for them. Thinking that I'm helping. I care. No. Enabling is selfish. Enabling serves the enabler, not the person being enabled. And I'm going to tell you what, addicts know how to find enablers. Because they want one. They want as many as they can get. They want somebody that's going to take care of them and they won't have to do anything. But they like to make excuses and say, my life was so hard. It's been so bad. That's not my fault. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. One Corinthians. I couldn't help it. We're going to make Wednesday night great again. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We're going to look at verses 13 and 14. Well, I'm in 1 Corinthians 10. This Bible confuses me. It's new and it doesn't look the same. I'm used to looking at a different Bible. It says 1 Corinthians 10, and it says verse 13. It doesn't say the right thing. Yes, it does. There it is. I found it. My Bible does say the same thing everybody else says. It was the other verse 13. I was looking at 13. Never mind. Too much. This is no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you're tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. There's no excuse. You're not being tempted in any other way than anybody else is. You just handled it differently. The new Living Version says you've never been tempted to sin in any different way than other people. We all get tempted. It's not an excuse to sin. It also says the one thing that I think is probably the most interesting part of this verse is that God won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. This verse gets taken out of context all the time, and people say God won't give you more than He can bear. Yes, He will. Because I'll tell you what, a lot of people wouldn't turn to God if they didn't get more than they could bear. But you won't be tempted beyond what you can bear. Which simply means God's not going to put you in any situation where sin is the option. There's going to be an option to get out of it without sinning in the process. Now, when it comes to addiction, I'm here to tell you, there's a way out, but it may not be pretty. It may not be fun. Withdrawals are not fun. They're not pleasant at all. Coming off of drugs is not fun. Seeing yourself for the first time and really trying to change yourself is not fun. But there's ways out of it without sin. Because God is faithful. He's going to be there for you. He's going to give you a way out. And the way out of addiction is God. And it's the only way out of sin. We already talked about the fact the Bible says that addiction and things people are addicted to are sinful actions or a sinful lifestyle. And God's not going to put you in a sinful situation. Well, then there's a way out of addiction. But it's God. The same way it is out of any sin. One more verse. 1 Corinthians 6. 1 Corinthians 6, and I promise you I'll find it right this time. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 12. I found it. It says, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. The New Life Version says, I'm allowed to do all things, but not everything is good for me to do. Even if I'm free to do all things, I will not do them if I think it would be hard for me to stop when I should. That's not only what addiction is, getting started with something and not being able to stop when you know you should. It's a warning. Don't be misled. There are things that you can do in your life that will master you, that will make you a slave to them. And it doesn't have to be massive things like cocaine or crack. It can be a lot smaller, more subtle things than that. Because you know, Satan likes to sneak the subtle stuff in next to us when we're not looking. Tobacco, How many people have to drink coffee all the time? Anybody? Yeah. What about all these quadruple espresso latte thingies that have, how about these power drinks the kids are drinking? It's full of caffeine and full of sugar and full of all this other stuff. Think you can get addicted to that? Well, it's not healthy for it. If you keep doing it, it's hurting you. Anything. Anything that becomes self-destructive that you don't quit doing when you realize it's self-destructive and hurting you is an addiction. So the point of all this is, addiction is a choice. You make a choice to take that first drink. The first beer I ever drank, I made that choice. The last one I ever drank, I made that choice. It was me making that choice. God gave me free will so that I could choose. But the thing we have to remember is that addicts are just people. They're people that are broken. They're people that are sinning. They're not necessarily bad people any worse than you and me or any worse than anybody else. But the point is, instead of telling them that you're stuck this way, you need to go to AA meetings for the next 50 years of your life. You're never going to get over this. People, you got to be on medication and everything else. People need to realize that it's a choice and they have hope. People need hope. When you're told this is the way you are and you're never going to be able to change, there's no hope in that. When I was told I couldn't ever change this the way I was going to be, I was miserable. It was depressing. But the same therapist that told Melanie she didn't have to be that way told me the same thing. And it was the same reaction. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. It's my choice. Oh my gosh, it's my choice. And it's been a battle. But Melanie and I are both proof that it works. That the stuff that we're talking about is true.
Amen.
And we have to be able to give this hope to other people. There are people suffering, families being destroyed. Melanie and I both, we have a daughter and a son that are both addicts. 3/4 of her family are addicts. My dad was an alcoholic. We watch people walk down the street drunk and high all the time. Addiction is going crazy because people don't understand what the purpose of life is. Everybody's looking for that thing. Where do I fit in? Who am I? And if they don't figure it out, they try to find it in something else, or they use it to hide from the fact that they don't like who they are. God is the answer. God is how you find out who you are. God gives you a purpose. God gives you the strength and the ability and the family to be able to help you get through it. I can't tell you how many times this church family was there for Melanie and I as we struggled through this stuff. And you know what they never did? They never looked at us and went, "You're stupid. Why do you keep doing the same dumb stuff? Why do you keep acting? What is going on? You should have been better than that by now." Nobody ever did that. They always said, "We love you. God loves you. What can we do to help? We're here for you." The fact is, there is hope, and we have a choice. And that people need to have the empowerment of knowing that they can choose to stop living this way. And that there's people that truly will help them. Because it's a horrible thing right now. It's destroying families, it's destroying our culture, it's destroying the whole country. It's insane. This county has become nuts with this whole addiction thing. It's just insane. And it's getting worse. That's all I have.
That's all?
That's all. I hope you got something out of that.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes, sir.
what about crack? As I understand it, they don't use